I'm Kitty.
And I'm Jennifer.
And we're the O'Neill sisters. And we're going to show you how to make this beautiful statement necklace.
We love making statement necklaces because it's a great way to show off big, beautiful beads.
We're going to show you what kind of beads to choose. We're going to show you what kind of findings you'll need. And we'll show you what tools you need.
And we're going to take you step by step through making this necklace. We're going to show you how to arrange the beads, how to string the beads onto bead stringing wire, and then how to attach the toggle clasp.
If you have any questions at all while you're working on your statement necklace, you can leave us a comment and we'll reply. We're here to help.
And we'd love to see your finished necklace when you're done. We can't wait to see what beads you pick out.
Let's get started. To make the necklace, you'll need bead stringing wire. We're using 19-strand bead stringing wire and it's silver. You'll need your beads, and we have 7 of these beautiful large agate beads. We have 8 of these black faceted round beads or rondelles and 14 metallic beads, and these are faceted also. We have a silver toggle clasp, both sides of the clasp here, and we're also going to use these little tiny crimp beads, these little crimp covers. We have 2 wire guardians. We'll show you how to use those. And for tools, we have chain nose pliers and wire cutters. The first step in making our statement necklace here is to arrange the beads. So we have our little design going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread out the 7 agate beads like that. And then the way we planned it is we're going to have a bead, one of these big black beads, in between each of these agate beads. And then we're going to have one on each end here. And then we're going to use these little metallic faceted beads as little in-between beads. So we'll put one on either side of the black bead. This doesn't have to line up perfectly. It's just going to remind me when I start stringing the beads on the bead stringing wire what order I want them to go in. And if you have a bead board, which is like a necklace board, you could be doing that on your necklace board. But this works just fine. And it just gives me my little plan so I know how I want the beads to go. You can substitute any beads in here. You could use any color for these large ones. And you'll just have to get extra beads if your big beads are smaller than this. These big beads take up a lot of space, so they do a lot of work. And now we're ready to string our beads onto the bead stringing wire. To string our beads, we're going to use the bead stringing wire, and I already cut a piece that's about 25 inches. The necklace will be about 17 when it's done, but we want some extra on the ends for the clasp. And then I like to start by just stringing all the beads onto the wire, and to keep them sliding off the end, a little trick for you, a little piece of masking tape on that end, and then I can go to the other end and start feeding on the beads. And this is just straightforward as it comes. If anybody ever asks you how do you bead string a necklace, this is how you do it. Just lay them out and feed them on one at a time. And that's a nice reason for doing the design ahead of time. You do all the design work before they're on the string because it's harder to unstring them all and then put them back on in a new design. If you lay them out in advance, you can just move them around. If you decide you don't like the color of the bead, you can swap it out. And I'm just going to keep feeding these on. The bead stringing wire is very flexible. That it's called wire is kind of confusing because it's not wiry at all. It's like a robust thread. It's almost like a coated thread. So it's stronger than using just string or thread. You wouldn't want to just use sewing thread for this because it would break. These beads are heavy. So the bead stringing wire is stronger. It doesn't break easily. It's flexible, has some nice movement to it. I'm just going to keep feeding these on. And we got these beautiful big agate beads at a bead show, which is a great place to find a bead that's a little more special. You can find regular beads at the local craft store, but if you want something nice, you should go to a bead shop, your local bead store, or go to a bead show. It's especially nice to see them in person. Now I just have 2 more beads to feed on here. I'm going to make sure I get them in the right order. I want it to match this end, so it goes silver here and then black. And now all the beads are on the necklace, and all we have to do now is put on the clasp. To put the clasp on, we're going to put one end of the toggle clasp on this end of the wire. This is the end that has a lot of extra slack. And we're going to start with the crimp bead. Whoops. We're going to start over and do the crimp bead. Okay, we have a crimp bead on there. And now we're going to use a wire guardian. This is totally optional. It's a little piece of metal. It's kind of horseshoe shaped. It has a tube opening here on one side. You feed in the wire. You go around the back of that little horseshoe shape and feed the wire through the little tube on the other side. And this will protect the wire from any rubbing from the toggle clasp. Next, you feed on the toggle clasp, and it's going to nestle inside that wire guardian. If you don't have the wire guardian, just feed on the clasp after you put on the crimp bead. And I just need to mush that into the opening here of the wire guardian. And then I get my crimp bead, and I'm going to feed this end back through the crimp bead. I'm going to grab it with my chain nose pliers and feed the end through there, just like that. Come on. There it goes. So I've got crimp bead, wire guardian, clasp, back through the crimp bead, and I'm going to pull it all very tight together. And now you take the chain nose pliers and you crush your crimp bead, and that flattens it to a little piece of metal, and that'll hold everything in place. Then this is also optional, but we think it's nice and tidy. This is a crimp bead cover, and what you do is it's like it's almost like a bead with an opening. It's hollow. You slide it over your crimp bead and close it over the crimp bead, and it makes that crimp bead look like a bead. So it's a nice little finishing touch there. So this end is all done. Got that clasp on there. We still have a little piece of wire here, but before we trim it, I'm going to slide all the beads down to that end of the necklace. And I'm going to feed that wire into the previous beads. I'm just going to tuck it in there. And that way you won't have it poke you in the neck. If you trimmed it right here next to the crimp bead, it might stick out a little bit and poke you, and who needs that? Instead, we'll just hide it inside our beads. There it goes. What we want to do is slide all the beads down together. So now we've got all the beads together on the wire, and this is where we want our clasp to go. We're going to remove that tape, and just like we did before, we're going to slide on the crimp bead, and it goes all the way to the end there. Then we're going to slide on the wire guardian. And the wire guardians, you can get that with other findings at the bead store. It'll be where you pick out your crimp beads, and it's with the bead string and wire. It's with all that stuff. And I'm just going to feed through the other side of the bead guardian. It's a little tighter to work on this side because you're up against the beads, but you want all this clasp and everything to be tight next to your beads, so there's no slack. If there's slack, then the bead string and wire will show in your necklace. I'm going to grab that with the chain nose pliers. There. Now we put on the other side of the clasp, and it's going to nestle inside that wire guardian. Come on. Just put on the clasp like that. And there, it's in there. And now we just want to feed this wire back through the crimp bead. So I have to just peek on in here. The crimp bead has tried to slide itself onto the wire guardian, but we're going to make it jump back over where it belongs. There it is. Slide the wire through that little crimp bead. And I'm just going to hold the crimp bead with the chain nose pliers. I'm going to crush it anyway with the chain nose pliers. That just gives me a little bit more control here. feeding that through. And we want to make sure that this is all very tight up against the beads. My toggle clasp is trying to escape. There we go. So that's nice and tight. We don't want any slack in there. And now we can crush that crimp bead and trim the wire. I'm going to trim it a little bit bigger here, and I'm going to do like we did on the other side. I'm going to tuck this wire into this bead. And you don't have to do that. You can just trim it close if you want, but this is just tidy. It gets that little piece out of your way. Doesn't poke you. You give it as a gift, you know it's not going to poke anybody. So I'm just forcing that inside the bead there. And like I said, this end is tighter. Everything's pulled tight, which is what you want, but it means just a little bit of a tighter space to get that wire in there. Well, it doesn't want to go, so I'm going to do the other thing, which is cut it close, which is also an option, and I can tuck that smaller piece inside the bead. That worked out. And last thing is just covering our crimp bead with our bead cover. I'm going to hold it open. There we go. Third time's the charm. And crush it right over that crimp bead. And it actually caught that little tail that I trimmed. So now we know the tail is nice and safe. It's tucked inside our crimp bead cover. And now our necklace is complete.